questions, they'll probably, your voice will be on the video, but we've got the camera set up, so it's really just
Yes.
kind of above your heads, so don't feel self-conscious. My name is Kristen Wooten, and I just recently moved my counseling center into this side of the building, and also had a neurofeedback practice, which I moved in, as well. It's nice to have everything under one roof now. I have a couple of other counselors in practice with me. We have a psychologist, Dr. Jeff Baker. He's coming up on retirement, but a wealth of knowledge. He's about 45 years in practice. He does interviews for hiring police for Butler County Sheriff's Office, and just a variety of other kinds of emergency counseling, crisis counseling. And we have Delana here who works with kids and does EMDR, which is awesome. We love that. So today, we know that almost everybody you meet is walking around with trauma, and so we just kind of wanted to go over some different avenues for helping people heal, or helping yourself heal from what seems unavoidable sometimes, which is unexpected events that were not in your plan. And then, so we'll go through, the first half of the presentation is more focused on kind of almost like a checklist of health things we can do, and the modalities of EMDR and neurofeedback. And then we'll take a short break. And then Adriana is a licensed massage therapist, and she's gonna walk us through an exercise with using oils and some different massage techniques. So hopefully we're shooting to be done around 11:30 today. So to start out, and I'm new at, I'm just starting out with presentations.
You're doing great.
Yeah. So I'm technology illiterate. So I'm learning to use all of this stuff. And I'm very excited to be able to figure this out. So what is trauma? It's really when we have an experience that's just really overwhelming. We feel powerless, usually helpless, unable to do anything about the circumstances either happening to someone in front of us or to ourselves. And it can be anything from you're 5 years old and your teacher humiliates you in kindergarten to, you know, somebody that you love was in an accident or something. So it's a wide range of things. People tend to think, oh, that didn't happen to me, or, you know, I didn't have any trauma. But even just not having parents at home and having to raise yourself is a kind of trauma. So just be mindful that it comes in a lot of different shapes and sizes. Let's see here. Symptoms. Oops. Common symptoms of trauma. Brain fog is a huge one. Just not feeling present, maybe feeling kind of floaty. So then it's hard to pay attention or focus on anything if you're kind of half present in your body. Where you can't focus on tasks, a lot of times we have memory problems because we are not present, because we can't take in any of the information around us. And then we see a lot of anxiety and panic attacks. And people, it's really interesting, people can have trauma from their first panic attack. And so there's ways like we can do EMDR with the first panic attack, so then they don't have the trauma, because they think they're gonna die. They have a first panic attack, you don't know what's happening in your body. So if we do EMDR with that, we can resolve that, and then there's less fear of any future panic attacks. It helps kind of bring down that whole fight-flight system. Feeling depressed, obviously, is one. Feeling irritable, agitated, explosive even, are some of those. Just feeling overwhelmed, like sights, sounds, smells, all can be overwhelming. Grocery store can be overwhelming. Certain kinds of lighting can be overwhelming. So if you have any of those kinds of things, that can be a symptom. And of course being jumpy and startling. And then having sleep issues and nightmares, waking or not falling asleep. And then the digestive issues where we see a lot of IBS or constipation, where your body just is clamping down and not letting things move through. So that's what trauma in general looks like. And this is gonna be like a speed class, I guess, on all these things, because obviously you could spend all day on each one of these things that we're going over. So how do we, I wanted to go over 2 kinds of trauma. So just in general, we have single incident trauma, and this will come into play when we talk about EMDR. Single incident trauma is where we're just kind of the normal person with a normal level of hardships, and we have a car accident. And now we don't wanna get in a car, we don't wanna drive anywhere or go anywhere. That's a single incident trauma. Then we can have chronic trauma, which is when you're growing up, your whole childhood, you've been having terrible experiences. So that's more chronic. And one of the things that people don't really know what to do with is betrayal trauma. So in marriage or a relationship, if you're cheated on, that can fall under either single incident or chronic, depending on how much that has happened. But it truly, truly is a trauma for the majority of people when they experience that. Let's see. So how do we heal trauma? A lot of people think that if we just get back to normal after that happens, especially if it's a single incident, it'll just resolve. And so there is a chunk of the population that'll happen for. If there are no really significant chronic trauma events in their life. People who have had chronic trauma throughout their life and they have something happen will have a greater incidence of PTSD, which is where it becomes a disorder and can't function. So we usually need methods in order to move things along, to have healing happen. Let's see. People who have experienced the chronic trauma that we talked about, they're gonna need a team of people. They're gonna need a lot of modalities happening either concurrently, which is at the same time, or doing something for a while and then moving on to another modality. And I know that finances usually limits how many of those things, and also time, how many of those things we can be doing at the same time. So we just kind of look at it like a buffet, and we do the best we can at figuring out what the next step is. And it's not the same for everybody. Everybody heals differently. Let's see, what's the next thing here? Oh yeah. All right, Barb, how do I do this? Oh, there it is. I love this video, it makes me laugh. Oh no, how do you do the sound?
Is yours lined up?
No. Did you go outside?
Oh,
No.
let me
Did
start
you
it
talk
over.
to anyone? No. Did you eat well? No. Did you limit your scrolling time? No. Did you make any plans? No. Did you drink enough water? No. Did you get enough sleep? No.
She was saying like, I don't know why I'm feeling down. So she goes through that whole list. So I get a lot of 20-somethings in my counseling practice that come in and they're struggling with depression and anxiety, and we go through this checklist. They just, that's not something they pulled us aside in high school and told us how to take care of ourselves. And so I get a lot of introverts that are too busy, and so that creates a lot of anxiety and panic attacks. They need to build in space. I get a lot of people who are staying up and watching whole seasons of something on Netflix, and so they're not getting enough sleep, and not realizing how that accumulates and makes you not function very well. And obviously, we all know, diet and exercise and those kinds of things. I thought it was interesting that being dehydrated can increase anxiety. So that's something to keep up with. Chiropractic alignment is something that I learned over the last few years, that if we have kids that are kind of bouncing off the walls, to make sure that they get to a chiropractor who can look at what's going on up under their, the top of their vertebrae, because that can create hyperactive activity if there's they call them subluxations, which are basically misalignments. So we like to kind of try to check off that box if we can. Injury, especially head injury. I get people sometimes who come in with depression. one lady in particular came in, and I knew her, and I hadn't seen her in a while, and she was more depressed than I'd ever seen her. And I noticed that her eyes weren't really tracking very well, which was unusual. And so I'd asked her if she had been in a car accident or something, or had a head injury since we talked last, and she had. And no counseling in the world is gonna fix a head injury. So I try to pay attention to, have there been any, even whiplash, minor incidents, because it's a soft, buttery organ inside of a very sharp, bony head. Toxin exposure, obviously heavy metals can create a lot of stress on your body, or pesticides. And then we've got infections and parasites, obviously can do the same thing. It puts your body under stress.
Can I say one thing about the dehydration?
Sure.
I'm a nurse too,
Oh,
and it's the number one cause of sleepiness during the day.
yes, I
Is you
find
just
when I
don't have
can't
enough
stay
water.
awake,
Yeah.
I'm like, drink some water.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yes.
And then all of a
Very
sudden,
important.
everything comes back online.
Very important.
Like, oh, there's my brain.
It would probably go to caffeine, which kind of
Totally
dehydrates.
down.
Yes.
Nice. Have you exercised today? No. Did you go outside? No.
I love her, the way she responds, it's very matter of fact.
Okay, so, those were a lot of the practical things we could do, speed class again on that. And, one of my specialties is called EMDR therapy. I don't know if anybody is familiar with what that is, but awesome. It stands for eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, which is crazy mouthful. I follow a doctor named Dr. Daniel Amen, and I think he is amazing. He does something called a SPECT scan, which allows him to look at both electrical activity and also blood flow in the brain. And so we can look at this brain before it had he can tell by looking at an image of the brain in a particular way that there is a type of activity pattern in the brain that shows that we've had trauma. So I thought that was really interesting that it was that concrete, and that after someone does EMDR, you see this enormous reduction in activity that's really not supposed to be there if you're healthy. So, yeah.
I just have a comment. If anyone has any doubts about EMDR, I had it done. She changed my life. Like, I thought the practitioner, I'm like, oh, great, I finally go to counseling and I get quacked. She's
Yeah.
talking about this.
Like, what is this
and I'm
crazy thing? Yeah.
Seriously, but life changing. I
Yeah.
can't say enough good things about it.
Yeah, I've done a couple sessions too, I agree.
Yeah, I think it's amazing. I was the same. We got maybe a paragraph on it in grad school. I don't know how much you've got now. It's been a few years.
Two
for me.
paragraphs,
Yeah. And it just looked kind of weird, and nobody really talked about it. And then about 3 years into Doc always did talk about it, but I looked at the cost of it, and it was like $6,000. Like, still trying to pay off grad school. So eventually it started coming from every direction, and it was just time for me to go do it. And it completely single-handedly changed my experience as a practitioner. So, I kind of get giddy now when somebody comes in with not that I'm happy that they experienced a trauma, but if it's a single incident, I'm like, this is gonna be awesome. I'm not gonna believe what's about to happen to you. So, I do say, like, it does really, really suck when you are going through the process, but man, 3 to 5 sessions and you can be clear of some things. I had one woman that, I'm not gonna say any identifying information, but she was attacked as a teenager at night and wouldn't go anywhere at night after that in terms of like grocery stores and gas stations. And we did one session and she came back and looked very confused, very puzzled, and she said, I went to the gas station this week at night. And I didn't realize that I'd done it until I was driving home and realized that I just did something and I wasn't afraid to do it. So that was really, I've got 100 stories like that now. It's so fun. But I did want to play this video. Right there. I was so excited when he talked about this. I was just about beside myself. It's always fun to see these things making it into mainstream.
intimate moment on a new mental health documentary series, Oprah, on Apple TV.
London is a trigger, unfortunately, because of what happened to my mum, because of what I experienced and what I saw.
He says after years of therapy, he's now discovered eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, better known as EMDR therapy.
Just notice what comes up.
He shows people what a session looks like.
Was there a particular trick, or does it happen every time? Is it always the same?
Happens every time. Everything feels tense. It's being hunted and being helpless.
We see Harry crossing his arms and tapping on each shoulder, something called bilateral stimulation.
With EMDR, we go back, we look at the past, we look at how your past may be affecting what's happening to you currently.
EMDR practitioner Whitney Bird recommends EMDR therapy, one of various techniques to treat trauma for many of her patients.
It's changing the way that the experience is stored. And when the brain changes the way it's stored, then again, you feel differently about it. And that tapping is part of the process to allow the brain to start doing that.
So initially this started out as eye movements, and then someone had a client who was blind, and that's the necessity is the mother of invention, and started realizing we could use tapping, just physical tapping like that. We can use sounds, so there's actually EMDR sounds on Spotify, also probably YouTube, and we can use, I use something called tappers, and they are pods, and now I've seen wireless ones that you can wear on your wrist. So I have a friend who owns Brain Balance, which is a place that works with kids that have autism and ADHD and different kinds of disorders. And they recommend that the parents get the kids the touch, I think they're called touch points. But we have to double check that. And so they can just wear them on their wrists and it helps to bring down their anxiety. So this one vibrates from side to side and people just hold them while we work. So the bilateral stimulation is one piece of the EMDR, but it works wonders for just decompressing at the end of the day. So anybody can go buy these, they're not on Amazon, but I can tell you where to get them. I don't recommend if someone has a tendency to disassociate, which means kind of leave their body because they become too overwhelmed or triggered by trauma. That one might not be great, but kind of the typical person, this is fantastic for just powering down at the end of the day if your brain is just really going, and give yourself 20 minutes with this or with the sounds, and you'll find your brain settles down quite a bit. So the other piece of this,
So you're saying, so not to do the EMDR trauma therapy, but just as
just the
and
stimulation
calm
helps
down.
settle your nervous system. Yeah.
So the sounds that are on Spotify or those kinds of things.
Yeah,
are good.
they can really
'Cause
make a
I have a
difference.
daughter, she's 9 and she gets anxious.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah,
that
so those
is
touch
the-
points one with the wristbands might be really good. They're not the cheapest things. I think they're around 300. This is only about 150, but if you've got a kid who wants to move around and you're able to get those would be, they'd probably be really good for her.
So do you encourage them to think of anything as they're doing that, or is it just?
Well, during
almost like
therapy, yes.
meditation? Right,
Yeah,
during therapy,
But end
not.
of the day,
It's just to
you're
kinda
gonna
relax.
probably wander through your day or
Okay.
think about something you're upset about, but, they're lower key events like, I forgot the milk at the grocery store and I gotta be 8 places tomorrow to pick up my kid and this and that, and it just kinda helps bring your nervous system down. So, but with the really more significant things, we recommend that somebody see a counselor to just, it helps to have someone witness your story and helps to have someone, it's called co-regulation, where I feel stable, I feel present, and so I can use that to help you feel connected and more grounded, as you go through a really difficult memory. So, but EMDR, the bilateral stimulation, how do I wanna explain this?
Do you have a question?
I do.
I'm so sorry.
At the break or whatever, is it okay to ask you just for some recommendations? Cause you look at YouTube and there's 1,000 of those sound
I
things.
know.
And if you could just recommend some reputable ones or
Yeah,
point in a good direction,
yeah, I
that'd be
can do
helpful,
that.
thank you.
Okay. So like she said, EMDR changes the way the memory is stored. So when we do bring up the traumatic memory, it affects how we feel about it and how we think about it. So initially, when I think of a trauma that I've been through, I might feel my adrenaline spike to a 10, 0 out of 10. And then as we do the work, by the end, it might be a 0 or a 1. And I still remember the memory, I still have the history, it's still in my timeline, but instead of living like this, it's kind of back here. And I don't really have any elevated adrenaline when I talk about it anymore. So that is amazing if you've ever experienced that shift. So the bilateral stimulation in and of itself inhibits the amygdala. And the amygdala is what's responsible for anxiety and stress and fear. And when the amygdala is inhibited, then our prefrontal cortex works a lot better in terms of speech and reason, problem solving. And so that trauma goes from being in sort of this loop that's trapped in time to just kind of opens up and is open to the problem solving and even developing positive thoughts about what you took away from it. So there's something called post-traumatic growth. And so that's what happens when we go through a trauma, but we make sense out of it and we take something away from it. And we see what good came out of it, even if we might not choose to have gone through it. So that's one piece of it. And because the amygdala is calmed down, I think that's why we can do the work then in moving through the trauma in counseling. So the other piece of it, it looks different for a lot of practitioners. I will say I'm not a purist, so I'm not certified in EMDR, even though I've had all the trainings. And Francine Shapiro would probably spin in her grave if she saw some of the things I was bringing in, but they work well together. So that she worked very hard to get that therapy established. It was really not respected. It was in the late 80s, so just being a female in a male-dominated world in the 80s trying to make something weird like this established was really challenging. So she's very like, this is how you do it. She's passed away now, but so we remember the memory. We go into the memory and sit with it. It's very experiential rather than having a narrative and speaking and talking about it, because we just get all wound up in our head around it, and it actually elevates the adrenaline to just talk about it. So that's not productive anymore. And that's what it showed in the studies, that the veterans that she worked with actually got worse, most of them, in doing talk therapy only. So including CBT, which is a common therapy it is evidence-based, but it's terrible for trauma. So I think that EMDR, it's great for like, there could be other aspects of your life that it's really good for, but when there's something really traumatic, it just winds you up even more. So the guys who got EMDR, they got a lot better. Most of them got off their meds. They didn't need any more meds or med increases after, 3 years down the line, they were still doing well. So it lasts too, which is really cool. Okay, I know I probably, where's my last time? I should know. Okay, so that was in a nutshell class on EMDR, and I'm always open to more questions later.
Do you just go to EMDR for trauma now? Like, is that
Yeah.
usually your first?
I really do. There's just no point in doing anything else, because I'm telling you, I'm just like, okay, you're not gonna believe what's about to happen to you.
We call it
So,
good.
yeah, it's really good. So,
would you say that single incidence trauma, EMDR, is a good go-to? Would you say the same
Yeah.
for like chronic trauma?
that's
as
the
well?
most fun, is the single incident.
Okay.
So, the chronic that's like, it's like chipping out a Shawshank with a spoon. Like there's so many incidents, but we have found that we can cut it back by starting with the earliest memories that people have, because then those generalize out into the rest of their timeline. And so we don't have as much work to do after that. So the chronic is a lot more work, but sometimes there are really key core memories that we can tackle that will create a big difference, even if we haven't gotten to everything.
So you'll still use EMDR as your go-to, regardless if it's single incident or chronic.
Or chronic, yeah. Now, sometimes we have somebody come in and we try to do EMDR and we can't even get near it. I've had a couple people like that. And so when that happens, that's a great lead-in to this.
You're welcome.
But some of you probably know the book, The Body Keeps the Score by Bessel van der Kolk. So, that's one of the places where I have read about neurofeedback. I found it because my son had ADHD and he did not respond well to meds, and I didn't know what I was gonna do. So Dr. Daniel Amen, who's the brain doctor I mentioned earlier, also talked about neurofeedback. So I was trying to figure out where to find that for him, and there really wasn't anything locally. So I found a system that I could rent, and I also found a lady that had used both kinds, who was a psychologist in Cleveland. So she's got her videos on YouTube, but it was such a big difference for her for using the system that we use now that it was kind of a no-brainer, because I don't have to be, as a mom, I had it out of the box and running in 20 minutes. And I couldn't hurt my kid with it, I can't hurt other people with it, it's automated, it's so easy. So we love it here. And so when someone can't do the work, we can send them over to neurofeedback for several sessions. Usually we say at least 10 to start. 20 is ideal, but again, we always are trying to recognize financial limitations and time limitations, and see where they are. And a lot of times their nervous system just comes way down, and then we're able to do the work we need to do. So then they don't need to continue to do the neurofeedback, or they do both while we're healing, and then discontinue when they feel well enough. Let's see. Let's say about the neurofeedback. Here it is. So this is a kind of biofeedback, and it trains the brain to just function more efficiently. It's a mathematical mirror, which I cannot even pretend to understand. I took all the certifications, the advanced certifications for this, and some of it made a whole lot of sense, but they got into literally quantum mathematics and stuff, and I was like, I'm out. Like, I don't even do word problems, man. So, the information is out there if you are a science geek and you really wanna know that stuff. But for the most part, I know that it's easy to use and it's safe, and I don't even need to know how it works in order to help people with it, so that's very good. We have sensors, you can see he has sensors on his head, and we've got a system back here you can look at when you get a chance. We use conductivity paste, which is sort of the bane of our existence around here. It's sticky, it's gross, we can't do it without it. So it's how the electrical activity moves from the person's scalp and ears to the computer. So, that's fun. But it's like a stethoscope. It's picking up electrical activity and sending it to the system. And then the person is listening to music. It can either be through speakers on the system, or it can be through headphones, and we usually use headphones. It's just easier to hear the interruptions. So the system's using the electrical activity and embedding pauses when it picks up on fluctuations. And we always have electrical fluctuations, even when we're making healthy decisions or doing reasonable things. So the system isn't gonna make your brain do something. It's just literally triggering the orientation response of the brain. An example of that is when you're on the freeway and there's a rumble strip on the side. And that doesn't make you not go out of your lane. It just alerts your brain that something has changed. And this is what the pauses in the music do. They alert your brain that something has changed. And then it brings it to awareness, and it will adapt accordingly to what's healthy for your brain, which is why we like this particular kind of neurofeedback, is because we're not making your brain do anything, we're not putting anything into your brain, we're not pushing your brain, we're just triggering its awareness, and then it's gonna adjust itself. I've got a fun little graphic here, but I don't know if we can read that. Anyway, it just kind of shows that overall layout that we've got. The system, that box in the middle is called the Z-Amp. All it does is convert the data from analog into digital, and then feeds it to the system. And then we've got some great lazy boy chairs that you can peek in the Office 6 in the back when you get a chance. And you can actually be asleep or in a coma. Like, it will work on the nervous system, you don't have to pay attention. So everything in this world is so hard to get better. Here's one thing, like, you can just come in, take a nap, and get better while you're doing it.
So it will work while you're sleeping.
Yeah, And there are stories online of people, like one lady was doing this for a living, running neurofeedback systems, and her son was in a motorcycle accident that was catastrophic, and she was able to bring it into the hospital, and just all the nurses' responses over how quickly he recovered. Now, it wasn't, I mean, when you see the interview at the end of him, like, he's not what he was,
Yeah.
but the incidence of explosiveness that often comes with a brain injury was way down, and his ability to, you know, kind of interact with people, to tolerate sensory stuff was much better. Yeah, it's really cool. So I have some sensory issues. I don't know where they came from. I've just kind of always had them. We had to cut the toes out of my pajamas and couldn't have the blind in the socks and things like that. And I would just, as an adult, just feel really drained trying to push through all the different things all the time. And I was hoping that it would completely make them go away, but instead it kind of seems like they're less, but I also have more resilience to just push through them. So that would be what I say is the key thing that this provides you is more resilience and ability to tolerate stressors. So we have a lot of, it's really fun to see kids with neurofeedback because they have a whole community around them, and people notice, you know, like if you don't tell the teachers that they're getting this, but they have a lot of behaviors that you don't want in school. Maybe they have some tics. They are always getting out of their chair, and then they do 10 of these, and all of a sudden the teacher starts asking what changed because this is a different kid. And it's like the kid is just more themselves. So, oh, that leads me to one of Lynn's video. This is a good video.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
My husband has severe sensory processing issues around trauma from his childhood.
Yeah.
Would a combination of, I mean, we can't eat dinner together.
You know, another one that would be good
The
too.
sound, he startles.
Yeah.
It
startling.
It disrupts his whole life,
Yeah.
and ours too.
You'll see that come way down. And the
Okay.
other thing that might be helpful, I just found a new chiropractor, and I know there's a million of them in our city. But this guy, it's one called Intuitive Spine is his business. He's down in Mount Lookout. I will say I've only been to him twice, but I've been watching the company that he was trained by.
Okay.
And it's really cool. What is it called? Spinal Network. And there's no harsh adjustments. I didn't do well with the typical snap and crack. So they literally barely touch you. It's just the lightest touch. I don't even really get how it works, but it causes kind of trapped traumas to leave your body. And so there's one where when you really are moving into healing, it's called the spinal wave, and you see the person's body just like do this, and it's kind of an involuntary wave. It's not like a seizure. You could stop it if you wanted to, but if you just let it go, like it shifts everything. So I already have some differences I can tell. So you might
Okay, thank you.
explore that.
Thank you.
I think this is his name, Trey.
Okay.
I don't remember his last name. But Intuitive Spine.
Thank you.
All right, so this is one mom that
Lily, my daughter, is 16 years old, and we adopted her from China when she was just 1 year old. And immediately we found out that she had some neurological difficulties, some balance problems. She couldn't walk, she couldn't do anything that other kids would do very naturally. For her, it was always a struggle. We realized that she had lead poisoning and heavy metal toxicity. And so that impaired a lot of functions in Lily's brain, in Lily's central nervous system, and it was very hard even to find a school for her. It was the emotional balance. She was in the center, and it was really difficult for her to even spend the whole day without having a couple of very, very deep emotional crises. I felt really overwhelmed and really exhausted and tired because it was just so demanding to live with Lily day to day. For years, we went all over the world, really, and we tried so many approaches. I was traveling in Australia, and then I saw because my husband is Australian, and we saw an advertisement for neurofeedback. So I started looking in the website, and thought, wow, that's really interesting. So we decided to rent the machine for 2 months, and my daughter had 20 sessions so far. You can see that her central nervous system and her brain has learned how to regulate itself. Because when we say something to her that she doesn't want to hear, instead of screaming, leaving the room, she takes a moment. If she can react sometimes and be very excited, but then she would leave the room, go and breathe a little bit, and you can see that even in her eyes, something's happening, that she's kind of calming herself down by herself without being prompted or anything. It really is transforming our family dynamic, and we are so more peaceful. And now she can really engage in all different activities, family activities that we didn't even dare to do before, because I was personally afraid that it would turn into an explosion of anger. And so now it's really fun because we have much more I would say communication and family time. There are a lot of things that are totally different. She's like a new person. It's almost like all these potential that was like locked inside of her are unleashed, and then we can really see who she is, and that's really wonderful.
Yeah, and that's what we saw with my son as well. I mean, that's our story in terms of, we couldn't do anything, we couldn't play family games, couldn't go out to dinner. Like there's Christmas, birthdays, always meltdowns, because it was just ADHD, but I just had so much irritability. And when we got about 8 sessions in, and I asked him to unload the dishwasher, and he went, and he got up and did it. I was like, that is not placebo. And we had our first Christmas without a meltdown, our first family vacation without a meltdown. And now he's out in California, so he doesn't continue to do it, but he has other strategies now, like cold plunge and different things that are really helpful for that. But that's the common thing that we see the most, is like that thing that she said about, it's like my kid without all of the angst and anxiety and frustration. And like, there's my kid. That's how I felt. Like, there he is. I knew he was in there. So it was really cool. Okay. So neurofeedback, at least the system that we have, cannot be called a treatment for anything. It's a brain training that's an overall nervous system training. And then as an outflow of the nervous system feeling more balanced and grounded, we see these things shift. So we typically will see fewer panic attacks or no panic attacks anymore. In regards to depression, when people, for instance, get chemotherapy, they often get something called chemo brain, which is interrupted sleep, depression, heaviness, meds don't work, can be really frustrating. And we did 10 sessions with one lady who had chemo brain, who had pretty profound depression, and she was like, I'm good. I haven't seen her since. So it just really, I don't know why it helps so much, but that was the lady I mentioned in Cleveland, the psychologist who I based my decision on. Was her story was chemotherapy being an issue. Because you feel more focused or more present, you feel more focused and you can remember things better. We often see sleep regulate. We have several people that come just to help keep their sleep on track. This system is sometimes a magic bullet for people, and more often more like the chiropractor, where you come for a while and then you feel good, and then maybe you go for a few months and then you start feeling a little off, so you come back for a handful. So that's really typically what we see. The other thing to pay attention to is when there are ongoing health issues, if we take away the neurofeedback, then the symptoms come back. So when I was going through menopause, if I didn't balance my hormones, then I was still gonna be a hot mess when I stopped doing neurofeedback. So that really helped me a lot while I was in the transition of trying to figure out what my body needed in the new stage. If there's gut health issues, or if you're living in mold, these are all things that are gonna affect how well the neurofeedback stays. Because obviously if you're still in the same situation, even a chronic trauma that's ongoing, it might help you function better in the trauma, but you still, if you can change what you're living in, that would probably be the most ideal. sensitivity, reduces the explosiveness and the irritability, so you just don't really see that as much anymore, other than what's for typical person. And then balance and coordination, which is awesome. So this is really great for sports, kids in sports. You know, if they really wanna get to peak performance. We see this with, police officers when they are shooting, that their targeting gets much better. So it has other just kind of above and beyond applications as well. If I had my way, every firehouse and police station would have one of these in there, you know, just they can do for themselves. Cause it helps so much with, just being tip top. So I think I better land it there, so you guys have a minute to take a break. Feel free to ask questions either in the break or even afterwards. I'm not, you know, I don't have a time limit for when I need to get out of here, so I can hang around and talk if you want to. So go ahead, and if anybody needs, grab some water or go to the bathroom, and then we'll get Adriana up here and set up, and she'll do her thing. Hers is gonna be much more
Thank you.
interactive. That'll be fun.
Thank you. Anybody have any questions?
Oh, yeah.
How long is a normal neurofeedback session
34 minutes.
in the EMDR?
Well, I do 50 minutes. Every once in a while, there's somebody and you're like, oh, I probably need an hour and a half, so we'll schedule that together, but,
Do you
yeah.
do a lot of prep work leading up to those sessions?
It depends.
Okay.
I got a pretty good meter for people, so, you know, if you're going by the classic instruction, it's, you know, you do a lot of work with, resiliency and resourcing first. But sometimes I can just tell, like, oh, they can totally do this. And I also have gotten really good at the game with don't spill the beans, which is where, it's just kind of a funny way to, I don't know, do you guys remember that game when you were kids? Like, you're like, can you handle this? You know, and you're just trying to keep them in that therapeutic zone, basically. Cause it's called a therapeutic window of tolerance. So a good therapist can know how far can I take you without any surprises. So I try to move as fast as I can without making a mess, cause I don't want people to feel gross when they get out of here. And we leave time for people to settle, and they can always sit in one of our other offices if they need a minute. But I try to leave kind of a landing strip where we have time to come to a really stable place even if we're not done.
Thank you.
Yeah, because when I did my first session, I felt like I was the chair. Like, I was so grounded in the chair, I couldn't really move. I was so relaxed.
Good.
And I was like, I've never felt this in my life. So it did take me a while to just kind of just be in it and then come back, you know, to
Yeah.
the world.
It's like you go to a different place.
You
when you're
do.
working. Yeah, it's very
You did,
experiential.
yeah, it's so hard to describe. Like, you can feel sitting in a chair, but when you're so grounded, you're just like, the chair.
One with the chair.
One with the chair. And I'm like,
be the chair.
it's like you have the biggest weighted blanket on you in a good way.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's an amazing feeling.
I love that you had such a good experience.
It was. And we did the light thing back and
The light
forth.
bar. Yeah.
Which was a little nervous because I get kind of dizzy if
Yeah.
commercials and stuff I can't look at, but
But as long as
they
you
would
pace it
start
slow
to,
enough.
yeah, it was
Yeah.
slow enough, it would just kind of meld together in the middle,
Yeah.
the little lights.
Yeah. That's one of the reasons I use the
It's
tappers.
fantastic.
Is because the
Yes.
just the risk of headaches or eye fatigue or
Yes.
things like that. So
Uh-huh.
I mean, that's what almost all the studies are done on the eye movements. But
Yes,
yeah,
it's fascinating.
I love all the
Have you
different
found that like the sound and the tapping are as effective as the
Yeah.
eye movement?
I found actually that the tappers are the most effective for
Wow.
at least the people who come to see me,
Okay, okay.
because they don't really need to pay attention to them. They have that added benefit of feeling grounding,
Yeah.
where the eye movements don't give, you know, you don't have a sensation that's. I'm a really tactile person, so I don't know. I get a lot out of the vibration, and that seems to be the people who come here feel the same way. So, yeah, but you can use any modality. Main thing is just not going too fast, and a good therapist is gonna know when you're not in the window.
That way if you guys wanna, if you haven't tried it.
Yes, I have not. Well,
You can
there's
change
that
like how
tapping
fast
app.
they go and how
That's
intense they
really
are and
familiar.
that kind of thing.
Yes, and it teaches you how to do that, the tapping thing, yeah. I just don't have enough space on my phone to use it.
It's a different problem.
I have 95,000 photos on my phone. I'm going to Marquis Center later because I need
Wow.
assistance.
That makes sense now, I'm like.
It is causing trauma. Because I'm out hiking and I can't take any more pictures because my storage is too high. So I'm offloading every app that I have and, yeah.
Do you want me to just push this out of the way?
It's anxiety provoking.
And then here's a clock if you need it.
I have to come.
Is that okay?
It's pretty dark.
Yeah, is it too dark?
Probably.
I know, I still have a little bit more work to do getting it.
Sarah, are you doing okay with the lights?
How long have you been?
I will be okay.
We
We
just
just
moved
moved in August,
The
so
maple
I'm just
trees
leasing right now, but I've got on my
Yes.
list of things that I'm gonna do, like,
My entire,
change some lights.
What do you use this space for?
allergy
I'm
related.
kind of sick of building up
It's
to
okay.
be.
I'm just making sure it wasn't.
So we got a lady who does yoga, she's not from our practice, she just comes in, because they don't have room in their practice, yeah, so she comes in, does her thing. So
No, I was
yeah,
trying to,
no,
I was trying to see
so
if
we
we
don't
could
just
shut off
set
half
it
or
or
something.
something. Seminar benefits, practitioner meetings, because I try to
Yeah,
get
you
people
feel
that
like
all disciplines. Usually always looking for functional medicine people.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
How does that
A
go?
little bit about it.
Oh, there you go.
So that would get us talking, because we need a team, like I can't help my client all by myself. So I wanna know who you are, what do you do, what do you like, and I'll try to go to people, because I only see people 3 days a week.
Wait a minute.
So I try to.
Yeah, it wasn't like, yeah, now I feel
Have
it.
an understanding of what it is they do.
Gotcha.
It's really
So
fast.
we do meetings.
Oh, yeah.
So we've got 2 neurofeedback offices, we've got 2 open offices, and usually by hour, and then my office and the other 2 offices right now. It's sort of evolving.
I couldn't see it, but I woke up the next morning.
Well, I think everybody's.
I know. You do.
So whenever you want to start,
Chris and I have been running for years, and I, in 2017, I was
Yeah.
chronic.
Still growing
And so,
relationship.
then I was in neuro, and
let's stop it, and then we're gonna start.